The year was 1945, a year that would be remembered for its profound impact on the world. World War II, a global conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality, was raging across continents and oceans, engulfing nations in a relentless storm of violence and destruction. For 6 long years, nations had clashed in a maelstrom of violence that had consumed countless lives and left entire continents in ruins. Cities lay in rubble, and the landscape of Europe was forever altered by the scars of war. In the Pacific theater, the war raged with particular ferocity, as the vast ocean became a battleground for control and dominance. The Empire of Japan, driven by a potent mix of nationalism and militarism, fought with unwavering resolve, determined to expand its influence and secure its place as a dominant power in Asia. By the summer of 1945, however, Japan's military fortunes had waned. The relentless advance of Allied forces had turned the tide of the war. Allied forces, led by the United States, had steadily pushed back the Japanese advance across the Pacific, employing a strategy of island hopping to gain strategic footholds. The once vaunted Imperial Japanese Navy lay in ruins, crippled by relentless American air and naval power. The seas that once carried the might of Japan's fleet were now littered with the wreckage of its defeat. The home islands themselves were under constant bombardment, and defeat seemed inevitable. The skies over Japan were darkened by the shadows of bombers, bringing destruction to cities and towns. Yet, the Japanese leadership, clinging to a belief in their nation's divine destiny, refused to surrender. They held fast to the notion that their spirit and resolve could turn the tide. They vowed to fight on, even as the war exacted an increasingly horrific toll on their people. Civilians huddled in bomb shelters, their lives shattered by the relentless onslaught. It was against this backdrop of escalating violence and impending defeat that 2 cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, would become forever etched in history, not for their triumphs, but for the unimaginable tragedy that befell them. The devastation that would soon be unleashed upon these cities would mark a turning point in human history. In the summer of 1945, the world watched and waited, unaware that the horrors about to unfold would forever change the course of human history. The events that were about to transpire would leave an indelible mark on the collective memory of mankind, a somber reminder of the destructive power of war and the resilience of the human spirit. High above the earth, carried by sleek silver aircraft, flew 2 technological marvels, their innocuous names, Little Boy and Fat Man, belying their terrifying purpose. These aircraft, the B-29 Superfortresses, were the pinnacle of aviation technology at the time, designed to carry these unprecedented weapons across vast distances. These were no ordinary bombs. These were weapons born of cutting-edge physics, weapons that harnessed the very building blocks of matter to unleash unimaginable destructive power. The development of these bombs was a monumental scientific endeavor involving some of the greatest minds of the era, working tirelessly in secret laboratories. Little Boy, the bomb destined for Hiroshima, was a gun-type fission weapon fueled by uranium-235. This isotope of uranium was chosen for its ability to sustain a rapid chain reaction, a process that had been theorized but never before realized on such a scale. Its design, though relatively simple, was ruthlessly efficient. The bomb's mechanism was straightforward. A conventional explosive would fire a uranium projectile into a target of the same material, achieving critical mass. At the moment of detonation, a uranium projectile would be fired at high speed into a subcritical mass of uranium, triggering a runaway chain reaction. This reaction would release an enormous amount of energy in the form of an explosion. The result would be an explosion of unimaginable force, an explosion equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. The city of Hiroshima would be forever scarred by this single devastating event, with tens of thousands of lives lost in an instant. Fat Man, the bomb that would later devastate Nagasaki, was a more complex and powerful weapon. Unlike Little Boy, Fat Man used a different fissile material and a more sophisticated method of achieving critical mass. It utilized plutonium-239 as its fissile material and employed a sophisticated implosion design. This design required precise engineering and coordination to ensure the bomb's success. Surrounding a plutonium core were carefully arranged explosives. These explosives had to be detonated simultaneously to compress the plutonium to a critical density. Upon detonation, these explosives would compress the plutonium to a critical density, initiating a nuclear chain reaction. This implosion method was more efficient and resulted in a more powerful explosion. The yield of Fat Man was even more terrifying than that of Little Boy, an estimated 21,000 tons of TNT. The city of Nagasaki would suffer a similar fate to Hiroshima, with widespread destruction and loss of life. Compared to the nuclear weapons developed in the decades since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Little Boy and Fat Man seem almost rudimentary. The advancements in nuclear technology have led to the creation of bombs with far greater destructive capabilities. Modern thermonuclear weapons, such as the American B-83 bomb and the Russian Tsar bomber, dwarf their predecessors in destructive power. These bombs are designed to release energy through both fission and fusion, resulting in explosions of unprecedented magnitude. These modern behemoths are capable of unleashing blasts equivalent to millions of tons of TNT, making the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki seem almost insignificant by comparison. The sheer scale of destruction possible with today's nuclear arsenal is almost beyond comprehension. Yet, the relative smallness of Little Boy and Fat Man does nothing to diminish the horror they inflicted. The human cost of these bombings was immense, with countless lives lost and entire cities reduced to rubble. The legacy of these weapons serves as a stark reminder of the devastating power of nuclear technology and the importance of striving for peace. In the blink of an eye, at the precise moment when Little Boy and Fat Man detonated over their respective targets, the world changed forever. The world as the inhabitants of Hiroshima and Nagasaki knew it ceased to exist. The cities, once bustling with life, were transformed into scenes of utter devastation. The unimaginable energy released by the nuclear chain reactions ripped through the cities with the force of 1,000 suns. This energy, unleashed in mere moments, was enough to obliterate everything in its path. First came the blinding flash of light, a searing white brilliance that illuminated the sky and cast eerie shadows for miles around. This flash was so intense that it could cause temporary blindness to those who looked directly at it. Then the shockwave, a wall of compressed air expanding outward at supersonic speed, slammed into everything in its path. This shockwave was powerful enough to flatten buildings and uproot trees. Buildings, once symbols of human ingenuity and endeavor, were reduced to rubble in an instant. The force of the blast was so immense that even the strongest structures stood no chance. The sturdy concrete structures that defined the city's skylines crumbled like sandcastles before a relentless tide. The very fabric of the cities was torn apart in seconds. The air, superheated to tens of thousands of degrees Celsius, ignited everything combustible. This intense heat caused a firestorm, a phenomenon where fires merge and create a storm of flames. Fires, fueled by the debris of shattered buildings and countless tons of burning wood, raged through the devastated city. These fires consumed everything in their path, leaving nothing but ash and charred remains. The lucky ones, those at the hypercenters of the blasts, were vaporized instantly. Their bodies turned to ash before they even knew what had hit them. This instant vaporization was a merciful end compared to the fate of others. For those farther out, survival would be a matter of sheer luck, a cruel lottery where the prizes were pain, suffering, and a slow, agonizing death. The survivors faced a world of unimaginable horror, with injuries that defied comprehension and a landscape that had been transformed into a hellish wasteland. Rescue efforts began almost immediately, but the scale of the destruction made it nearly impossible to help everyone. Makeshift hospitals were set up to treat the injured, but the sheer number of casualties overwhelmed the medical personnel. Amidst the ruins, stories of despair and hope emerged. Survivors clung to life, searching for loved ones and trying to make sense of the chaos. The immediate impact of the blast was a testament to the destructive power of nuclear weapons and a sobering reminder of the fragility of human life. In the wake of the blinding flash and the earth-shattering shockwave, a new and equally insidious danger emerged: thermal radiation. The intense heat generated by the nuclear explosions, radiating outward at the speed of light, seared everything in its path. For those unfortunate souls caught in the open, exposed to the full fury of the thermal pulse, There was no escape. The intense heat, reaching temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun, vaporized flesh and bone in an instant. Clothing offered no protection, instantly bursting into flames or melting onto the skin. Those who survived the initial blast would often bear the horrific scars of their ordeal, their skin covered in gruesome burns that spoke of the unimaginable pain they had endured. Even at considerable distances from the hypocenters, the thermal radiation proved deadly. Windows shattered, showering those inside with shards of glass. Walls absorbed the heat, turning into ovens that baked those taking shelter within. The very air itself seemed to burn, filled with a suffocating heat that made each breath a struggle for survival.